Hey guys, today's episode is going to be featuring Lucien Etori. Lucien's the Chief Strategy Officer at McCann, one of the world's most recognized brand agencies. I met Lucien during the pandemic. Well, I actually stalked Lucien on LinkedIn and persistently reached out to him until we got a chance to chat, but we eventually met. He answered the call from Cannes, France, and told me all about his international life and prior career as a DJ. I knew this was one of the coolest men in the world, and I wanted to work for him and be his bestie. Lucien has a multitude of impressive campaigns and bodies of work under his belt from years of working in brand strategy, and his perspective has been really important in shaping a lot of what our culture is today. When we spoke on my podcast, Lucien had actually just recently left RGA, where I had the honor to an opportunity to work with him and was in the process of finding out what his next challenge would be. Since then, he landed the CSO gig and hasn't looked back. In his words, in LL Cool J's words, "Don't call it a comeback, I've been here for years." In this episode, we dove into the life of this incredibly interesting man and his goals of one day building his own agency to benefit growth in African media and marketing. I'm excited to share Lucien's unique perspective as a Black man who grew up a child of the world and his connection to brand marketing and culture. We just scratched the surface, so we definitely can't wait to have a follow-up conversation soon once he settles into his big boy CSO role. Anyways, enjoy. Like, why should I listen to her, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Okay, so hi everyone. We have Lucien here. How do you say your last name?
Etori.
Etori.
Yeah.
And Lucien and I know each other from our RGA days. RGA was an agency we worked at together. I actually DM'd him on LinkedIn and he answered, and I remember we chatted during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. You were in France and I was in Brooklyn, and immediately hit it off. I thought Lucien was the coolest person I'd ever met, and I still think that. And he also knows everybody. And so, yeah, you've been an awesome, energy in my life ever since. And I know how much you've accomplished, and I'm super excited to talk to you and have everyone else learn more about your backstory and what you're up to now. Yeah. So we'll just get into it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're from and just kind of your backstory a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on this lush, plush couch.
Oh, IKEA.
IKEA? You should call it IKEA, just to give it a little bit of
IKEA.
a little bougie kind of connotation. But I appreciate you extending the invite. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. My name is Lucien. I am, it's hard to. And again, I promise I'm not going to go into fits of megalomania about how awesome I am, but it's hard to just have a singular term that captures.
It's I fucking rock.
What I do. Well, yes, I do. So I am a father of two amazing kids, Wilson and Janice. Willow, we call him, and Jaja, we call her. They're 8 and 11, and they're amazing. I am a proud husband to my wife, Charlene, who we call Shasha, French woman with all of the accoutrements of the French woman. I am also a brother to 4 amazing siblings. I have 4 sisters. They're kind of scattered around the United States, in Washington, D.C. area and in San Francisco Bay Area. And I am the son of Edouard and Thérèse Etori from a little city called Bafia in Cameroon. That's where I was born. And didn't really grow up there at all. And I'm lucky enough that my dad, who was a law student, was plucked by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs back in the late 70s He was chosen to be part of the embassy of Cameroon.
Okay.
And his first posting was in Washington, D.C. So we left, I was about 3.5, moved to Washington, D.C. So I have very faint memories of growing up in Africa. I remember a particular tank top. That's like my earliest memory. It was like a rainbow colored tank top, kind of ahead of its time, very Aimé Léon d'Or, but like 40 years ago. And I remember eating something out of a pan. That's literally, like I've talked to like people, professionals about this, and they go, they help you sort of jog your memory. And I was like, I was eating something out of a pan, and I had this rainbow colored tank top.
Food, I feel like food is something that gives you like memories, food and smells.
Yeah.
They can like place you right back somewhere 10, 20, 30 years ago.
100%. And that was one of these occasions.
Do you know what it was that you were eating?
It was fried. Everything's fried. It was fried.
Okay.
And I'm sure it was really hot, like
spicy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My family likes spicy food.
I have some pepper sauce from Liberia in the fridge if you want later.
I bet you do. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you did. We'll do a hot ones sort of section later on. Put it on Fruit Loops and see what that does. So left Cameroon, which is and it's created a situation where a lot of people ask me, "Oh, you're from Cameroon? Like, tell me what about the country and what's going on." And I'm like, "Listen, let's go to Wikipedia and see what the latest is," because I don't have any firsthand, and I subscribe to a bunch of Cameroon news folks and influencers, etc. So I kind of have a sense, and I still have a lot of family there, but the connection is just not there because I've been away for so long. So moved to DC, getting back on track. Moved to DC, lived there for about 3.5 years, and then moved to Paris, and that was a pretty significant change just in how to understand a different culture.
Was your family speaking French at home?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Both my parents are francophone. They're bilingual. Their English is completely serviceable, but I speak to them in French exclusively.
Okay.
There's also a dialect from their village, which to their unending, infinite sadness, I do not understand. One of the words that I do know is the word for pillow.
Okay.
In Bafia. Would you like to know what the word for pillow is? It's pillow. Yeah.
Wow. Is that where the word originated?
Not at all, but it was brought over by, there were some colonists back then. The Brits were there. They were like, "Oh my God, it's so hot here." And then the Germans came and they're like, "Oh, it's so hot here." And I think the Portuguese were the first there.
Okay.
This is many, many moons ago. The word Cameroon comes from the Portuguese camaros, which is shrimp or prawns or whatever.
Camarones?
Yeah, something like that. And that's essentially how the country got the name. It's like, man, look at these big ass prawns. We're going to call this the prawn
That's
place.
great.
And that was it. But imagine 16th century, you're like a sailor. You don't know anything. It's like, man, look at these prawns. Woo, Captain, what do we call this place? I don't know. Prawns?
That's so funny to think about. Like, if I was like naming a country in my own language.
Yeah.
And it's something that's simple. It's like, we should name it trees.
Treeland. And you go, man, look at these trees. Well, that's what happened with Iceland and Greenland. So it's interesting. It's a whole, how countries get their name. If you ever have an opportunity to go down that rabbit hole, oh my gosh, unbelievable.
Okay.
So
going back to Paris.
So Francophone family, for sure, but I lost all of that. Or at least it was pushed in the attic of my brain when we moved to D.C. There's no French there apart from my house. It was like Sesame Street and, Marion Barry. And then we moved to Paris. I didn't speak French right away. We got there I believe, in May of that year. And like every immigrant story, there's the incredible pressure that you have to make sense of what's going on in your world. So you're 7 years old, You don't know anyone in this giant multi-million person city. You know you're going to school in September, but you don't speak the language. So just imagine the dissonance,
the anxiety around
the anxiety, just your the cold sweats at night as a little kid, and you know your parents aren't helping because you know every mom, every dad in the world has the same answer to, oh my God, I don't understand anything. They go play with the kids, and like, I don't understand what they're saying. Go play with them, and you know, it's the correct answer because it forces you to, you know, engage with the world around you. But it's really hard. So, you know, I watched a ton of TV. The World Cup was happening in it was 1982 is when we moved there. The World Cup was happening, and it was Cameroon's, I believe, their first opportunity to be in the World Cup finals. So my dad was like, "You would watch every game of your brothers," and I didn't know this sport. I'm coming from, you know, the Redskins and the Orioles, and I'm like, what, 90 minutes? What? And they just kicked them. I didn't know what it was. I'm just, because I didn't, but back when I was in DC, there were famous soccer teams like the New York Cosmos with Pele and Beckenbauer and all these teams, but I didn't pay attention to it. So I'm there, and I'm like, what is going on? And my dad is like, literally, like, we're gonna watch this game, and he'd be like glaring at me if I wasn't watching. If
are you having fun?
He's just like, did you see that pass? That man illuminated the pitch with his pass. And I was like, yeah, it was a pass. I don't. The other guy got it. So I'm sitting there watching, you know, and I'm picking up, you know, some of the idioms at the time. So a lot of my French sort of fundamentals started from watching TV, and this is the classic immigrant story.
Yeah, I was going to say, everyone watching Friends,
music, watching TV. That's how you learn, you know, English. I'm sorry, in my case, French. So did that for a while, and then I picked it up. And in September, I started school. Everything was good. You know, the attic of my brain. I went in there, and I was able to go, I know how to speak this language. So everything was cool. We lived there for almost 5 years, and then. As a diplomat, you kind of don't control where you go. And you have to have a certain mental structure to be able to thrive in that kind of uncertainty. So my dad gets a call, you know, from the home country, and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Etori, you're going to Brussels." And I'm like, "Brussels? What? What's the what?" And you're like, "Dad, why don't you just get like a regular job so we can stay here? You could be like a factory worker and keep us here." I loved Paris. Especially from ages like 7 to 12. My God, I had a bike. Man, it was like having an American Centurion card. You got your bike. You're going places. You have your little friends, and it's the story that you see in every movie where for example, when you go to school, you know, I'd start off at my building, and then I'd walk like a block or two, and my friends from this other building would come, and then you come, and you end up as like a group of like 10 people when you go to school. Actually, my oldest friend in the world, this guy named Mathieu, I've known for 40 plus years because we went to elementary school together, and he came to my wedding. Actually, I'm fast forwarding, but he just showed up at the wedding. He was like, "I haven't seen you in 40 years, but I'm gonna come to your wedding."
Did you invite him?
No.
I love that.
He just knew about. There's something on Facebook or whatever saying, "Hey, wedding's happening there," and he was just like, "I'm gonna show up," and he showed up. It was amazing. I hadn't seen him since 1980 something. Yeah, it was great. So moved to Brussels. It rained. That's the end of the Brussels story. Then we moved to Ottawa, Canada.
Okay.
It snowed a lot. But Ottawa, lived there for a couple of years. And also, I do want to make a mention, Brian Mulroney, who's the ex-Prime Minister of Canada, his daughter was in my class for a couple of years. Her name was Carolyn. Very lovely woman. And her father passed away, I think, a couple of days ago, so I just wanted to... give my condolences there. But it was, 2.5 years of just really cold temperatures. And I'm from Africa. And even France doesn't get that cold.
Right.
Paris never gets that cold. We're talking minus 30, and as you know, as a Chicagoan, it's just life stops making sense.
Well, you don't go outside. You barely want to wake up because the only comfortable thing to do is to be in bed with a million blankets.
Yeah. But you can't because you have to go to school.
Right, which is, oh my God, like suiting up to go outside to go to school.
And every night your chromosomes are saying, Lucien, this is not for
You're from Africa.
You're from Africa. This ain't you. You're not built for this. But I do know how to ice skate, which, 6'5" black men, you don't see a lot of them who can ice skate. So I ice skate like at different rinks here, and people just go, hold on. What? Why are you doing the skating with the ice? Are you the NHL? I'm like, no, man.
NHL, you'd be way taller than everyone in the NHL.
There's some big guys in the NHL.
Good goalie.
Jerome Iginla. There's like a few of them. Big tough guys. And but here in the States, generally outside of the NHL context, people cannot accept that I can ice skate. So it's
You're like,
always,
actually, I'm a figure skater.
yeah. It's like, we talk to you about these triple axles. You don't even know what I'm about to do, man. And so I go with my daughter, and people just like they freak out. And it's the same thing when I speak French.
Right.
And it's a bigger commentary on education in the U.S. and indeed the world, but most prominently in the U.S. in that you can get it in Harlem, for example. There's a big Senegalese, Malian community. But if you go to, say, Knoxville, Tennessee, they're like, what? How, are you Haitian? And then you go, no. And then that's it. It just goes, black man, speaks French, Haitian. And if you go, no, it's not Haitian, then they're completely lost. They're just like, well, what?
Well, there's a big population of black people in France.
There's a continent.
And that.
Like 1 billion French speakers. But
Yeah.
what the point being that in the U.S., people cannot solve the equation of someone knows a second language. Like
Right.
it never occurs to them that I could have just learned
Right.
in school. It's just like, wait, hold up. So you're not Haitian? Like Haiti. And they go, no. No. And they go, well, what? Are you an actor? Like, what's going on? You go, no, you just learn, learn.
Are you an actor? That's
yeah.
the
It's like
median.
you're pretending. Like, you're like, I'm like Jimon Hansu's brother, Lucien. You know what I mean? And it just, the being able to appreciate someone knowing multiple languages, especially if you're like a visible like minority, is this weird trip. And if people only knew that, at the Lycée Français, which is where I've done most of my scholastic career, you have to have 3 languages, French, English, and then a third.
What was your third?
Spanish.
Okay.
And then I learned Italian sort of on my own, and then I messed around with Latin, which is the most dreadful year of my existence. But knowing multiple languages just widens literally your brain.
Right.
And its capacity to compute and process information significantly. So I'd encourage anyone just grab the Duolingo, get in there, and just kind of mess around with languages. It's shaped how I approach and engage with the world in a very, very significant way. So, so after Ottawa, got out of the cold, we moved back to DC, but in the suburbs, a little city called Bethesda in Maryland.
Oh yeah. That's where Marriott's based.
That's right. I've done meetings there.
I've been there for months on end.
Have you?
Places, yeah. That was a client I had once.
Okay.
I worked on the loyalty strategy.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, they're super nice.
It's a nice town.
Nice campus. Yeah, Bethesda, it's like all Range Rovers and lacrosse and divorces. It's those things and high SAT scores.
Did you say divorces?
Yeah. A lot of divorces there, strangely, but really nice, capacious SUVs. And yeah, it's tough. Against all odds, I went back up there, and that says so much about the city that I had a great time despite not being able to breathe the air for months on end.
Right.
So did that, and then after Montreal, I lived in Canada almost 6 years. I figured, all right, that's going to be enough of that. And I was like a professional student. When you're a diplomat, you can't really work. There's a lot of red tape from a paperwork standpoint. So I never had even like a part-time job or anything. You would just go to school. So I did every session like fall, winter, summer. So I was graduated. I was 21. Had a bachelor's degree, but didn't even have like a checking account. Like I didn't know anything. All of that my mom and dad handled. So I moved back after graduating McGill. I didn't even I didn't even stay for graduation. Like last class, last paper, I like flew out the next day. They mailed me my diploma because I was like, that's gonna be enough of the not feeling of my extremities. Like, I want to feel my extremities. And then at that point, my dad is like, when you have to keep going. And I was like, I'll think about that. But let me just kind of get through at least graduate school. And at that point, I just thought, what's the antithesis of Canada? And so that left California. And then you go, okay, San Diego, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, please. LA, my dad was like, I'm not buying you a car. So I thought, well, that's going to be hard.
Right.
They didn't have any kind of public transportation there. This is in the 90s, mid-90s. And that left San Francisco. So I was like, I don't know anyone there. Joe Montana. So Too Short. You know what I mean? That's what I knew of like San Francisco. Yeah. And not knowing a single soul there, I applied to applied to a bunch of schools, chose San Francisco State because it's the biggest school in San Francisco. And they had a really great opportunity for me to construct my own graduate degree because I didn't want to do an MBA. I didn't, financial accounting, I don't care about that. But I care about history and sociology and geography and the things that make commerce what it is, which are not ledgers. They are relationships and things like that. So with the dean of the school, I was able to create my own program. Went there and I powered through it in a year. So I have a graduate degree. I'm 22 and I've never worked a day in my life. So from that point on, I figured it's probably time for me to get a job. Went to the career center at my school and I'm looking through all the brochures. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? I don't know. IBM, Intel. And I happened on a brochure it just had a bunch of yellow apples and then a red one in the middle. And I thought, what kind of weird agricultural commune is this? I thought it was misplaced. I thought this doesn't belong here. But a voice in my mind said, open the brochure, Lucien, open the brochure. So I opened the brochure and the world of branding was revealed to me. I didn't know what it was. But it asked, a simple question, like everything is branded. Like literally the covering on this particular cushion has a name.
IKEA.
IKEA. The laces on this sneaker, you order, New Balance orders them and it's called the champion lace or the whatever. Everything has a brand. That is the signage that allows you to navigate your world. And I loved that idea because it reflected how I lived.
Right.
Culture, plural, is how I was able to navigate my world, right? As a young kid, you have to learn a new language. You have to go to a place that doesn't have any sliced bread. I remember moving from DC to Paris. And I was like, what's this long ass, what am I supposed to do? And I remember first baguette, I bit in the middle. Like a Flintstone. I was like, oh yeah. And it broke apart. And I was like, this is unwieldy and impractical. Where's the sliced bread? They didn't have any jelly, or it was just, you have to get used to products that allow you to really immerse yourself in a particular culture and benefit from the experience. So I was like, wait a minute, this is a job. And then I turned the page and there was a whole section on naming. And I thought I just was frothy with delight. I thought, wait a minute, your job is naming things? There's no way this is real. So I literally called and I was like, hey, you have an internship opportunity. I'd love to, inquire more about it. And do you really have a naming department? And they're like, oh yeah, it's run by this guy and it's great. And we've named this, And I thought, golly, you know what? I'm going to do that. So did the internship for 3 months. And then after I completed that part, they offered me a job. And I started working company was called Interbrand in San Francisco. I remember we were on Maiden Lane back in the day. They've surely since moved back then, but we were on Maiden Lane, and that was my job. Me and the naming director, a wonderful man named Edward Sains, who I'm still friends with today, started naming things.
So tell everybody your most famous name.
The most significant name that I've created is Wi-Fi. And I did that in, call it 97, 98. And we were called by a consortium of companies. I'll make it brief because it's like a 6 to 8 minute story. We were called by a consortium led by a brand called 3Com back then. And, they had this technology specifically called IEEE 802.11b, and they needed a name for it. We were right at when there was a turn happening from the plugged-in AOL modem CD-ROM to Bluetooth and some of the wireless platforms that were really starting to emerge, especially in Europe first. So they had this thing, and they said, hey, this is how it works, and it's based on packet switching and all these things that we didn't really kind of comprehend. Because back then, what was better than you've got mail? And there was no real issue. I mean, AOL probably had a 60% market share back then. That's what everyone did. And this group comes in and they say, you can do it without wires. And we're thinking, okay, Jetsons, like we could probably, microwave, conjure up things in your microwave. I don't know. It felt really futuristic and unattainable to be able to send an email like that without anything connecting
what
you
is
to
it, Morse code or?
Yeah, but like where does it break apart and then fly to the sky and then come back down in someone's phone and it's the exact one and it doesn't have alien runes on it? Like what we didn't have the context for it. At least I didn't. If you followed the technology in Europe and if you knew what Bluetooth was or NFC or things like that, you might have been a little bit more conversant with it, but I wasn't. We were just like, what are you talking about? So, but it was exciting. It felt like we were on the cusp of something really interesting. So we started trying to metaphorically interpret what wireless means. What are things that are wireless? Clouds and birds and planets and things like that. So there was a group of names that centered around that premise, like very direct analogs of what wireless is. And then there was also a group of names that we did where we were trying to be a little bit more, differentiated and unique. And one of those was born out of, I was sitting at home, in fact, and I hearkened back to a time when we were in Paris where my dad bought a stereo. And back then you called a stereo hi-fi, and which stands for high fidelity, right? The ability of the system to reproduce faithfully, which is what fidelity means, from Latin fidelis, which means loyalty, faithfully reproduce the original source sound. And that name echoed in my mind because it's kind of an old school name. We'd walked away from that name. It was like probably more prevalent in the 60s, 70s. But by the 80s, 90s, it kind of fell a little bit by the wayside. People didn't really use it that much. But I liked it, as a music person, even from birth. I've always been very drawn to music and the technology around music. I thought hi-fi. So I thought, okay, well, if you did, say, wireless fidelity, which is the ability to kind of reproduce the closed circuit model of internet-based communications, then that would have the right amount of a familiar echo of something that you know, but it would be slightly different. And I thought, okay, that could be kind of interesting, And it had the advantage of being consonant, vowel, consonant, so from a pronunciation standpoint, that's always helpful. So I pitched it to my boss, and he was like, oh, it's kind of an interesting one. Pitched it to the client, and it was one of their favorites. We picked a group of probably, I don't know, it must have been 6 to 8 names back then, tested them, and it came out on top. And, we said, hey, good luck with that. You never know, the cemetery of failed brands in the tech space is a mile long, if it's not the right intersection of time and culture and, the economic state of a particular country, you can, the Zune, Microsoft Zune, it was a really good device. The mini disc is a really great device, but it just wasn't the right. It was just missing something. It might missing a design element, missing a cultural component, but it was always missing something. And then when the iPod comes out, then it does gangbusters, right? So we thought, all right, good luck, and then we moved on to the next project. And then a few months later, it came out. Like
Wi-Fi.
Campuses were using it in the sort of Mountain View, Palo Alto, south of San Francisco area. And I remember reading about it in the newspaper going, oh my gosh, they actually went through with it. And I showed my boss and he was like, oh my gosh, they actually went through with the Wi-Fi project. And then that was that. But then we thought, okay, good, Godspeed with everything. Hopefully it works out. And then within 6 months, it was a global brand.
So we have the father of Wi-Fi here.
The stepdad, because the actual
It's like you adopted a dog, named it Wi-Fi, and then set it loose.
Into the world to bless people with the means to communicate. But you can argue it's probably outside the actual internet, the most significant, technology out there.
And it's allowed, a part of everyone's everyday lives.
Absolutely, and it's allowed, people to get information out in a way that they couldn't have before. So it's impacted journalism, and it's impacted essentially how people throughout the world are able to communicate.
Right.
So it's one of these things where not a lot of people know that story. I've not really gone out and pushed it as, hey, I created the name Wi-Fi, because it doesn't help me get more gigs or jobs or whatever, unless I wanted to stay in the naming space. But even then, the glory was claimed by my agency, Interbrand.
Right.
And you can go on Wikipedia, and it's there. Not the full story from my perspective, but certainly there's a little bit of a story there. And I remember Cesar Chin, another wonderful man, designed the original sort of pill, black and white, sort of yin and yang logo. So that's the story of Wi-Fi. So, put that to bed and then moved on.
So after you were in the naming space, tell everyone a little bit about the transition and why you decided to make that decision.
Yeah, naming is great fun, but it's repetitive.
Right.
You're essentially going through the same process every single time. You learn something often from naming projects, but the actual mechanics of it are the same. So I moved from San Francisco after about 3 years. I'd been working at Interbrand about a couple of years, a little bit over a couple of years, and then moved back east, be closer to, I was missing, home, my family. So I moved back east for a little bit. And then I was ready to come to New York, did more naming for a company called Future Brand, another big IPG-owned agency. And did that for a couple of years, did some great work, did some work for Marriott then as well. And I thought, after about, it'd been, call it 5 years of naming, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna stop. Like I've hit the wall of, I'm not learning anything new. And I'm a big believer in, there's, forgive me, I don't want to lose people here, but there's a concept in neuroscience where essentially if you were to cleave your brain into two halves, there's one that's like actively on, that allows you to process information, motor skills, et cetera, and then there's another half which, I'm oversimplifying and I'm probably saying something that's way off, but the easiest way for me to sort of share that info is that there's another part of your brain which, when you sleep, is when you are able to form new connections, right?
That's why I sleep so much.
Well, that's a good justification.
Brilliant.
But you have to essentially ingest as much information and get into as many experiences as possible, so that when you go to sleep at night, you're able to form new connections, right? And I thought, I'm just kind of stalled here, but I'm still, professionally, but I'm still reading, I'm still going to A1 and Vinyl Mania and all my record shops in New York. I'm still traveling. I'm still discovering new cuisines. I'm still like obsessed with men's fashion, etc. All these things are happening, but I'm not able to integrate them into my professional life.
Yeah.
So it created a little bit of dissonance there. So I figured, you know what? Music. I'm going to do something with music. And it was literally like one of those things where I woke up and I said, I'm going to do something with music. I had the opportunity. I used to live on 54th Street, and back then there was a bar called Light, 54th between Park and Lex. And I befriended the two security guards who are my friends to this day. And I got an opportunity via talking to the manager or the owner to just get a couple of random gigs, like on Tuesday afternoons, just to kind of play my music. It wasn't paid or anything. I think I got Diet Coke tickets. But that got me into it. And then a couple of people heard what I said and what I was able to play, and the way I would sequence the music, and how I had a really broad, kaleidoscopic taste in music. And I was able to parlay that into different opportunities, and very quickly ramped up, started playing with my friends Fabrizio and Edoa at a place called New Blue in Alphabet City. And did that for a while. We had a regular gig. It was like a monthly, so that was great. And I would just play around. I ended up playing at the Boom Boom Room, at the Standard. I ended up playing, opening for fashion shows. My good friend Duncan took me to Romania to score a runway show that he did. So I went to Bucharest.
That's cool.
And did that. Played, just all over the country and a bunch of places in the world. So I was essentially manifested, I'm going to be an international DJ, and that happened.
Okay.
I was able to, talk to folks and engage with different people and say, hey, look, if you are looking for someone who has a very international approach to music, I'm that guy. And generally, it's appropriate for a bunch of different, like, store openings and fashions and this and that. You're able to curate playlists, do these kinds of things. And I found that there was a real appetite for it.
Right.
So I did that for like 2 years.
What was the lifestyle like? And
it hurt because I didn't have any health insurance.
Yeah.
So you step lively. I would carry a flight case. Back then, I was very late into the Serato, like, digital DJ world. So I literally still had my needles, my headphones, and my records.
I feel like that's, like, when you see that now, though, that's so cool.
Yeah, there's a retro kind of quality to it, but
yeah.
More significant was the fact that you really had to think about the mix.
Right.
You really had to understand the bar or the event space, the clientele that's going to come, the age ranges,
even
and
like
demographics,
where the thing to put the needle.
Even before, that's the physical aspect of DJing is one thing, but just the strategy before you get to the space, that's more important, because you're going to show up with 100 records and you have to get 4 hours out of those 100 records. So if people aren't dancing, it's not like you can just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to put some Taylor Swift on. You have to really think about what you're going to do and create different chapters musically for how you're going to get the narrative out musically. And that's a skill. And the great
100%.
DJs of this world are absolute masters at it. And I have nothing but just complete admiration for people who are able to, with 100 records, a couple of crates, they're able to get the party live for hours. And that's how it all started. Now you can have 30,000 songs and you can call up anything at any point. If it's Wi-Fi, you can literally, like, play a YouTube video off. You know what I mean? So
it's also like you had to explore and discover those songs too, those records before you even played them. You had to have a wide knowledge of what was even available in the world.
Yeah. And you had to go to different genres blind. I love reggae, but I'm not going to sit here and go, I'm this big reggae expert, So you're going in, looking at different playlists, looking at different DJs. You're looking at, Pete Rock sampled this and Madlib sampled that, so that's probably good. And you get to Augustus Pablo and King Tubby, and they did this, and drum and bass is all essentially faster reggae, and you start making these connections. And it was incredibly exhilarating and certainly edifying for me from a musical standpoint. And I love that. I love that process, and I still do that now. That's how I ended up with Les Imprimés as the opening song.
We're going to need you to make a playlist that we can link to.
I will make a playlist, and it's going to be names that you've never heard of.
I love that.
But it is going to be so dope and so illuminating. You're going to love it. I love doing that, and I have people asking me to do that all the time. But I love doing it from the 60s to now and everything in between.
I love it.
And just to show the evolution of music and how it keeps coming. You know, there's no bad songs.
Right.
I don't think there's no bad music. It's just music you like or you don't like. If you keep it to that, then all music is awesome.
Right.
You know, and absolutely down to make a playlist for you guys. Yeah.
Okay, so just getting back into your branding experience.
Yes.
What made you make that shift back, and kind of tell us a little bit about your career and how you rose throughout time afterwards?
Yeah, the DJ part of my sort of journey through the world was important because it allowed me to believe that I didn't have to ask for permission. I would just do stuff. So the DJing was one sort of, I kicked the door open and I saw that people were like, yeah, man, Luce, come through, play this music.
Right.
We don't, awesome, you're awesome. Play the music. And I started doing a little bit of writing. I was a secret hotel reviewer.
Oh, that's fun.
Through a woman named Juliet Kinsman, who's an amazing woman who I got connected through a friend of mine, Harriet, who lives in she lives in South Africa now. Great woman. I've met so many amazing, wonderful people in my career and life in general that I feel compelled to shout them out. But I was able to go to a place in Jamaica called G Jam.
Okay.
Which is, you can look it up, it's an amazing property. I think it's still around. These little sort of bungalow cabanas in like an aviary in the city of, I think the closest city is Port Antonio in Jamaica, which is a solid 3-hour drive from Kingston. And I was able to go in there, all expenses paid, for like 3 days with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and just kind of, take notes and then write a little report. That was great. I did a little piece for Monocle magazine. I reviewed Cafe Select downtown on, Lafayette Street, probably. Yeah. Did a review, interviewed the owners, 2 Swiss DJs, very nice gentlemen. And I was able to, just try out stuff. My buddy Tony and I wrote a movie script together because we were just like, that's one thing I hadn't done yet, is write like a full 120-page script. So I was able to do that. And he's had a couple of people look at it because Tony's one of my best friends. And one of his buddies is a guy named Taylor Negron, who you might know from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Last Boy Scout, etc. Okay. He gave us some really wonderful notes on the script. So when you don't ask for permission and you just go in with positive, optimistic energy, wonderful things come out of that.
That's how I've always lived my life, and people are so confused.
Yeah, you go in there. Listen, we don't live long enough to be brooding and dour and doubtful. We just don't have the time. So if there's something out there that you feel like you want to try, man, go ahead, try it.
Well, and all those experiences make you more multifaceted, which then you can apply to so many more things, and it's like a snowball effect.
100%. And you're much more valuable, and you're just a much more interesting person.
Yeah.
And but being interesting isn't, you can be, you should be interested as much as you're interesting.
Yeah.
And that's a quote from a friend of mine named Rowan, where being interested is just as important as being interesting. And that you do by just trying things out. I'm lucky that through my dad's job and his unimpeachable performance, he was able to give us an incredible educational runway,
right.
which all of us did very well in school, my entire family. And I was able to, live in these different countries in a very, privileged way, obviously. Going to private schools, lycée français, French international schools, things like that. But I was able to parlay that into maintaining my curiosity. That's sort of the engine for everything. So just to get back to the point, though, after I did all of my creative initiatives, I thought, I'm not making money here in a way that I need to if I want to eventually buy a house and do some of the material.
It's funny how
things.
that happens.
Yeah, so I thought, man, I am cool, but I am broke. And I was single at the time, and single and broke isn't a great combo. So I thought, let me go out there and get back into the creative world at least. But I was titillated by the fact that the strategy that you have to, the strategic framework you have to create to DJ effectively, I could take that and integrate that into whatever chapter I was going to write for myself professionally next. So started working for a company called, they're now called CBX, which is a package design firm. And I was the head of creative strategy there. So I brought strategy and creative together, worked mostly on consumer brands, consumer packaged goods. I'm still friends with everyone. And that's also an important thing. Stay friends with everyone.
Right.
There's people who are like, yeah, it's cool to burn bridges and just kind of shut the door on a chapter and never look back. There's no chapters that are
You never know when you're going to
Life
come
isn't
back.
sequences of things.
Right.
It's one continuous journey.
Right.
And it's important to remember that. So worked there for a couple of years. Then parlayed that into, and I created my own consultancy called Work Product, and I would do like writing and naming and things like that on the side. I also worked for a company called Salt Branding, which is kind of a mid-sized company, with some of my colleagues from my first experience at Interbrand.
Okay.
They created their own company back in, I think, 2000, and held on to it for the better part of 20 plus years. So I opened up the New York office for them, worked there for a couple of years, and then started working at Havas in New York as a group strategy director. So worked on a couple of really major brands. I remember ADP, the human resources payroll company, was my big anchor client for a couple of years. Did some great work there. And then RGA slid into my DMs, and said, hey, we're looking for someone to help lead the strategy team here. And it all worked out. The clients there were way more cultural in their resonance.
Right.
And I thought it was your Nikes and your ESPNs and your Googles and your Ubers and things like that.
And wanting to do cool things. I feel like you would go to RGA for...
Yeah, you absolutely would. That's when RGA was top, on the vanguard of innovation, breakthrough thinking, iconoclastic executions, things like that. And it was a great fit for me, and I had great almost 4 years there. Left the company in September and wanted to formulate a thesis for what I want to do next. What is the story that I want to create? What are the protagonists? What is the plot line? What is the vision of success? And I gave myself a couple of months to do that. That's as much as my wife would allow me to not generate income. But it was a really cathartic, important part of my career. And it brought a level of clarity that I hadn't had for a long time, since probably when I made the decision I'm going to be a DJ. Because then you just start working. You're just working, and then started a family, and you're just providing. So you never ask yourself the question, what am I doing?
Right, and why?
And how long am I going to keep doing this? Knowing that the things that I'm interested in are not this. So I was able to articulate the story that I wanted to create, and that story was going to be centered around me and what I want to do. Not in an egotistical way, I hope, but it was really more of, all of the experiences that I've been lucky and privileged to have had could be valuable.
I mean, I thought that was the case, and that's why I wanted to bring you on here, right? Like, you are, as an entity, people are seeking you out for your perspective in the world, so it makes sense to want to center your career moving forward around that value that you've been kind of bringing, and you're giving that to other companies, so wanting it for yourself is I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to really selfishly, though, I wanted to just work on things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's your life too.
Right, and again, like I said, I'm staring at 50 in a couple of years, and I'm like, I don't want to live with the regret of, I should have, I could have, there was a moment there where I could have done my own thing. That moment is now.
Right.
And I'm essentially in the process of starting my own agency. I hate to call it an agency because I feel like it's a little reductionist. Because what I want to do is really, again, not ask for permission.
Right.
And do the things that I think make sense. So I have a little bit of a vision plan that I've put together that I've been sharing with a couple of people. I'm putting a little business plan together, and I'm having financing conversations. Like,
would you be down to kind of tell our podcast a little bit more about what your vision is?
Essentially, I started off with, and it's again a little bit of a platitude, but to me, it's all about widening your perspective,
right,
and adopting a much more global vision of a group of creative folks who want to create practical, tangible things that help people build a future for themselves. That was a very long-winded Barack Obama way of saying that the opportunities that exist in the creative world aren't all in the U.S.
Yeah.
And people know that intuitively,
right,
but there aren't that many small boutique agencies that adopt a global perspective, because essentially your first clients are going to be the ones that you have previous relationships with that are naturally going to be somewhat local.
Right.
So if you start, and again, it's small, it's just me and probably a couple of folks that we're going to bring onto the team, and then probably work with some of the best in class freelancers. If you're based in New York, you're going to hit the pavement and try to get New York based clients, or at least US based clients. I'm the consummate third culture kid. I'm not from really anywhere. I was born in Cameroon. I haven't been there in 45 years. I grew up in Europe, but I'm not, in France most notably, and I went to school my whole secondary in France, but I'm not French. I am now, actually. I just got French citizenship through my wife like a couple months ago. I've been in the US 38 years, but culturally I'm not like 100% like an American guy. So you kind of float around, and that's the life of the diplomat world. You kind of float around, and you get what you can out of an experience, and you take that with you, put that in your backpack of life, and then you keep moving on. So my perspective is naturally international. Right. I'm when I read or when I watch movies or when we decide to travel, I'm always like, where have we not been? What else can I learn from this place? And I want to integrate that perspective, that approach into whatever agency is. So I do want to work with designers, copywriters, content folks in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Latin America. None of this is groundbreaking. It's just you don't see it done. You have not seen it done, I think, successfully at scale. Right. Like, there's a lot of companies. RGA was one. Havas certainly is one. Ogilvy is one. McCann. They have offices throughout the world, 20, 30, 40 offices. But do they work internationally? Right. No. They're just like, all right, these are our New York clients. These are... Yeah. And by necessity, because the business is set up that way. You have P&Ls. Right. You have billing rates. You have profitability. You have margins you have to hit, et cetera. So, no, it's not denigrating the industry at all. It's just not set up in a way that I think is going to make sense for me. Right. So that's what I want to do, is essentially create an agency where we're in a post-office world. I don't need an office, really.
Right.
I just need access to the best creatives, the best, production and account folks to come together on a piece of business, and then if it's done, then you sort of go away, and then you build another team, and you build another team. What's important for me, though, is to integrate Africa into the mix in a meaningful way. I think a lot of lip service has been paid to companies saying, "Yeah, we're in Africa, we're helping," but they're in either South Africa,
right,
or maybe Nigeria, probably, and that's it. There's no one in Cameroon. There's a few.
There's
companies.
No one in Liberia.
There's no one in Liberia. There's no one in Togo.
Right.
There's no one in Mali. There's Ivory Coast a little bit, and maybe a little Kenya, but there's a lot of countries in Africa. There's 1 billion people there, and there should be a much more robust participation from Africa into the global creative conversation, and that's not happening. So in my view, this would be one way to start to, address that.
Yeah. What type of projects do you think would be like your ideal focus?
Ideal focus for projects would be, like I said, areas that I think are interesting to me, and by interesting I mean are ripe for transformation, i.e., are areas where you can really start to have an impact on people's lives and ultimately their communities and cultures, plural. One of the things I do want to make the point about the word culture is like this big buzzy jargon, but to me it's wrong. It should always be cultures, plural.
Yeah.
You don't talk about, hey, you want to lean into culture, you want to push culture. What is that?
Right.
It's cultures. Which ones? It forces you to be intentional about the culture that you want to adopt. And when you talk about sport culture as a singular, you sort of self-select out things that are cultural in nature that could also impact sports culture. Anyway, I don't want to get into some of the mechanics of things, but it's important for me to look at opportunities to engage with cultures in a way that's going to help people understand the world a little bit better. So I think things like hospitality, travel are great.
Yeah, that's big.
Anything that's in the entertainment, showbiz, TV shows, scripted series, original work, things like that. Anything in the art world, again, you have the beautiful pieces from Liberia, but how many people
also have them
or would go there that are from like Peoria?
Oh, there are like barely any tourists who go there.
No one goes.
Right.
And Liberia has a particular relationship with the U.S., right? Like you would think, U.S.,
right.
Liberia. As I started talking about how when you sleep, that's your time to make these new neural connections. I want to make or help clients and ultimately people make these new connections. I'm trying to make new connections.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to not necessarily just stick to what's happening in the U.S. It's inevitably to broaden things out.
Talk a little bit about the status of where their economies are with this kind of and how this can have an impact so like immediately.
Yeah, one of the things that I wouldn't allow myself to project any kind of firsthand knowledge because I don't, right?
Right.
I haven't been in Africa literally since I left. So everything that my understanding, my knowledge, my connections are from people who it's second degree basically. It's not me experiencing these things. It's hearing from and having an opportunity to talk to folks who do business there, et cetera. The main obstacle is always going to be infrastructure.
It's crazy.
And the lack thereof.
Yes.
And it's not for want or understanding. People absolutely understand that when you have the proper infrastructure, when you have the proper funding structures, when you have, all of the different elements that would contribute to successful engagement at a marketing level, at a creative level, at a brand level, everyone wins. Everyone understands that. It's just, it's not a priority.
what was so we went to Liberia like 2-ish years ago, and that was my first time in Africa. And we went to Monrovia, which, like I said, there are not a lot of tourists. And so what was really surprising to me was how something that maybe would be so simple and easy to accomplish, whether it be marketing, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be starting businesses in the United States, how a lot of that didn't exist because there were not the tools available to make that happen. And so how something's, as somebody from the United States, like if we were to come in and start something there, how immediate the effect would be. It was like, even just thinking about funding like scholarships.
That's right.
It can completely change the trajectory of people's lives just to get the education.
100%.
And to us, it's maybe $500.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting.
Yeah, and it's again, people know this. This isn't, no one is saying, oh, you know what you can do in Africa? You could teach people how to be great marketers. There are already great marketers there.
Right.
It's literally making that a priority and being able to, for those great marketers in Africa, give them the resources to have a much broader impact.
Right.
As opposed to just hitting certain numbers and margins, et cetera. Do projects, and people do it. Do projects where you are teaching people, hey, if you're going to have some sort of agricultural business, you're selling, the fruits of your farm. Maybe you shouldn't call your stand peanuts, or if you're selling shoes, don't call it shoes. Do something that differentiates yourself, so you start to understand how to create a particular unique brand for yourself, and bringing that sort of mindset to different areas.
Another thing too is like, you might have this monopoly on the town where you are.
Yeah.
But if you could expand and get platforms where you could market, like let's say you create or you build building materials, right? If you can get that word out, then you can expand your market.
Yeah.
Think about what that could do for like some of the creators in Africa, right?
100%.
And like giving them this international platform would be transformational. And also that would then bring stories to people like in the United States that they have never heard before.
That's right. That's right. You're 100% right. And, one of the things that I do want to communicate, and again, this is super, and again, I'm certainly not the first, but the reason I'm so keen on Africa is I want young African kids to go, he was born in a little village like me. And, again, through the luck of the roll of the dice of life, I was able to do all these things, but he's no different than me, who was born in some, small town or hamlet or village or whatever you want to call it. And he was able to do these things. I want young kids in Africa to go, the guy who created the name Wi-Fi is a kid from Cameroon, which is our neighboring country, et cetera, et cetera. I want, and I'm certainly not the first. There's some brilliant Africans who've gone back to Africa, and they are these references for young folks. And I just want to be another one.
It's like the more you can have, right?
Yeah, you should, it's unlikely that I'll, completely move back, to Africa. So that this feels like the most logical and most meaningful contribution that I could make is create a platform and a premise where I can hire African talent.
I love it.
And bring them on board and have them work on accounts that they would never have access to on their own. That it's not hard to do if you commit to it.
Right.
And that's what I want to do. So being able to widen that opportunity, I think, is really the linchpin to everything that I'm trying to do for this next chapter.
Do you think you'll set up like an anchor place somewhere in Africa?
Yeah, you have to, because you cannot do, you cannot do business remotely in Africa. You physically have to be there.
Where do you think it'll be?
I haven't figured that out yet. I don't know. It's going to be where there is a foundation of trust that I can have, and a mutual exchange of value. It's easy for me to go, hey man, I'm this guy, and I got these degrees and diplomas and this experience, etc. I'm going to come in and solve it. That's not how it works. I need to be in service of the people in those communities there first.
Right.
It's not, I can make money here, no problem. But my first responsibility is to make sure that any engagement that I have with a company or brand or a government, organization in Africa brings value there first.
Yeah.
So I should have a physical presence. Hopefully, that's something that's in the cards. But yeah, I haven't sorted out the geometry of where I would fit on the continent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, keep me posted. I know an architect.
You do?
Yeah, Emery's mom is an architect. She runs her own business.
Beautiful.
Out there. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. So we'll keep in touch. But again, I don't want people to look at it as this big utopian thing. It's just, you just organize yourself, get the resources, put a little plan of action together.
Right.
The money is there.
Right.
You just have to make a persuasive case that you can bring some value to your investors as well as to the greater, community, society, world, etc. And it can get done.
I actually think that in some ways, Africa is a really great place if you want to find endless opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because you can take some of the skills that you might have from wherever you are and apply it, and it'll actually have an impact, right? It'll actually
right away
be worth something. Yeah. And also, it's much less of an investment because, even land is much cheaper. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really interesting. And that's just an example of something that we kind of take for granted and think it'd be really hard to enter that space here.
Yeah.
But you could take something like that and go there, or even, like I said, Emery's mom's an architect. Mm-hmm. It's a traditional career path, but she went and she was able to be one of the only women architects in Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
And she gets to work on so many different types of projects, whether it be building homes she's building home for a presidential candidate, mm-hmm. or working on an oil, forget what it's called.
Rig?
Not a rig, not a brewery.
Refinery.
Refinery.
Yeah. I was going to say keg, and I was like,
oil keg.
She's designing oil kegs? That's not
a
right.
refinery.
Yeah, a refinery.
And so, she was saying you would never have the opportunity mm-hmm. as an architect in the United States because you have to specify into one thing and do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of cool. It does really open doors in a different way.
All Africa is missing is opportunity. That's it.
Yeah.
The talent is there, the smarts are there, the resources are there. It's just opportunity. That's it. So
and a little bit the funding going to the right places versus corruption.
Yeah. I mean, and there's corruption here.
True.
In much on a much larger scale. So you're right. I think it's opportunity plus infrastructure, and it's going to transform the world. Africa's due. It's not. There's no way that entire part of the world will continue to be relegated to no one uses third world anymore, but there has the enthusiasm, the buoyancy, the opportunity, the ambition is there. So if at my little infinitesimal level, I'm able to go, you know what, I'm going to use what I've been able to get here in the U.S. and in the Western world, quote unquote, and at least bring folks into my story, into my journey, so they're able to then create their own. That would be good.
I'm so excited.
I'd be happy with that.
When you told me about this, I was so excited about it.
Good. Effervescent with glee, I bet.
Exactly. More about you, mm-hmm. just as a person. Where do you find bliss these days?
The answer is always music.
I love it.
That is the one thing. Well, not the only thing. The one thing out of, I'm sure, several, that is able to elevate my mood. You ever do something and you feel like you need a song to do the thing?
Yes, always. A soundtrack to your life.
So you're like down to the specific activity. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, make a lasagna. Therefore, I need to listen to this.
Yes, absolutely.
By the way, this is not personal experience. I do not make lasagnas. I don't have the patience for that. But there are certain things where if I'm like, and again, the cliche is like your Sunday morning cleaning.
Right.
You put on some like Anita Baker or something. And I was doing something and I thought, oh, you know what I need to do? I need to listen to this song. And it was 10 at night. I might have been like picking up my kids' stuff from the ground. As a parent, by the way, 90% of parenting is picking things up from the ground. So I'm picking up my son's, whatever, Legos. And I was like, oh, this would be a great Lego picking off the ground song. And I found the song. And for 3 hours, I got lost in, I didn't pick up anything else. I was just listening to.
You're like, can you put some more Legos out so
music.
I can pick them up?
I stopped picking up the Legos up and I was listening to music because one song, and this is sort of the structure of the DJ mind, one song leads you to go, oh, okay, it'd be good. If I were to transition, I'd play this, and then I'd play this. And I did that for 3 hours. Like the other, it must have been Sunday, so yesterday, Saturday or Sunday. Saturday going into Sunday. And my wife, who fell asleep, was like, what were you doing? I didn't hear you coming to bed. I was like, I was just listening to music. And she was because she knows, she understands. That's the one thing that I can say with utter conviction and affirmation that allows me to get to a place of bliss.
Yeah.
Of,
it's like meditation.
But actively.
Right.
Because I'm dancing around while I'm doing it, and that's the one. And that feeds my thirst for new sounds to get me to that place again.
Right.
It's hard, man. When you're a DJ, it's hard to get people to get up from their seats to start dancing. It's a really significant thing to see when you play a song and someone just goes, hold on, I'm gonna dance to this song. And then you see them do it, and then you start thinking, okay, I'm gonna play for that couple or that group, and you just go, oh, they really like this, and you start identifying how they're dancing and if they're on beat or not, etc. And you start creating a whole narrative around them. And when I do that for myself, because I'm always like the imaginary festival, right, where it's all really interesting, this beautiful heterogeneity of people and different backgrounds, etc. And that allows me to play everything from, Middle Eastern funk music, shout out to Habibi Funk, who I've been listening to for years, all the way to, the whole UK hip hop scene, which I think is super interesting right now, to old 60s Brazilian, like hard sambas and things like that. So I'm always looking for, there's like a very famous expression in song called looking for the perfect beat. And I've been on that quest for like 40 years, looking for that.
Well, it probably evolves.
Yeah, but it always changes. Yeah, so music is the answer. That was a bit of I took a little detour there, but that's music.
I love it.
Music is where my bliss is.
Okay, I'll give you like two more.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Black-owned restaurant in New York City?
I do. It's called Tatiana.
Yes!
Yeah.
I think I told you about it.
You went before I went.
Yeah.
For sure. And I remember thinking, first of all, how'd you get a reservation? Because that's a challenge. But I've had the opportunity to go, I think I've gone twice. And one was compliments of Shannon. Do you remember Shannon Washington?
Yes.
So anyway, great wonderful, amazing woman, and she invited me to dinner there. I think it was TikTok was even involved, and it was 2 dinners actually, if I remember. And we had the full menu almost.
Incredible.
And it was just a triumph.
We have Kwame's book, like his cookbook.
Oh, you do?
And I made some of them, and they're really good.
Yeah.
You can borrow it if you want to.
Oh, I'm not.
You're not gonna cook
I'm
it?
not cooking.
Okay,
No,
well, I
will
can make
go
it
to
some
the
for
thing.
you.
I will go.
You'll go to Tatiana.
I'm one of these guys. I'm like, I will go to the place and eat it. Cooking, I just literally don't. I can't. The chopping.
I feel you.
The blending.
It's relaxing for me, but
Yeah.
He's opening another restaurant in DC this spring.
Really? Because I think he
Yeah.
came from
Yeah.
DC, opened up something, and then now he's going back.
I think he's going to keep Tatiana.
Yeah,
but
for sure, yeah.
He's opening it up, and I'm actually going to DC in a few weeks, and I called to see if I could get a reservation, but it's not open yet.
Okay.
So
but it's this year, 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. So that's for sure my favorite Black-owned restaurant.
What about Black-owned brand or like product or anything like that?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a streetwear brand, and I'm gonna screw it up. I think it's called Para,
Yes.
and it's from the Netherlands.
Okay.
And I love what those guys are doing.
Okay.
And I'm not sure again who's owning what, but that's a brand that I've sort of tracked over the years, and I think they do a wonderful job of bringing kind of a Black sensibility, mixing that with their European experience in a way that's really original.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
What is a piece of advice you would give to your 10-year-old self?
Piece of advice that I'd give to my 10-year-old self is something that I've said before, which is don't think there's anything you can't do because of your station in life, your skin color, your education, your this, that, and the other. It just, like I said, we don't live but 80, 90 years if you're lucky. And in that time, you have to experience as much and try as much as possible. And I'm seeing, so that would be the advice is don't ask for permission, just do it.
Yeah.
Don't be crazy, like don't, be a drug dealer, but.
Well, and it's not like
stay within the confines of legality.
It's not like a don't ask for permission and do something illegal.
Right, yeah. You want to stay outside of, all of those.
Like consent is a good thing.
Consent, and yes, and having the right alibi. Like stay out of Rikers, you know what I mean? That's what you need to do first. But if there's anything that you're interested in, do it.
Yeah.
That is something, and I've had this discussion with my wife, where the way she grew up, you weren't incented to do something that didn't feel like a solid job or something that you can have as a foundation to build your life and ultimately a family and a career. If you didn't have that, she's a dancer, and in Europe you can't just go, hey, I'm going to be a dancer and make a living for myself. So I would say she suffered from that, but what would her life have been if, she had 100% support from her family, and they said, yeah, be the best dancer, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And her parents helped her out a lot. But sometimes, we'll talk and she'll say, oh, I could have, maybe gone to business school and, started a business or done this or worked in an office, etc. But I just wasn't incented to do that necessarily.
It's also like this way of thinking of versus being like, why would you do that? It's that how can we do that?
Yeah, that's right.
How can I help you?
Yeah.
The no permission thing has been a big thread in my life as well, and my career. And I always felt very put in boxes, and I felt like a lot of the traditional career path was waiting for somebody to give you the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And I really believe that things started at least changing for me when I was like, well, I want to do it, so I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to go
That's
do
right.
it. And I don't need to wait for you to give me a promotion. I don't need to wait to go to school to learn something. Like, I don't need to wait to, I don't know, have someone tell me to make something or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this podcast is literally built on that mentality of like, if I want to go do it, I'm going to do it. And like, you don't have to be okay with that. Like,
that's all it is. And I'm seeing, and that's something that I try to inculcate in my kids, and I don't even have to, they do it naturally. Like, my son is very interested in a bunch of things. Now he's really into architecture, and he wants to open up a hotel, and he wants to build a whole city. And all I do is like get all these apps and all these little programs to help him. Like, he's got this CAD program where he's building a little hotel. That's my job, is when you have a child who says, you know what would be cool is this, and you can see they're kind of messing around trying to find information on something, you have to go in there, step in, and give them the tools to go ahead and do it. So I have him in a music production class because he's very attuned to certain melodies and sounds. You know, you'll listen to something and he'll go, oh, I love that sound, and he'll try to play it on his little piano. So I was like, all right, you know what, let me create at least a framework where you can learn like real skill sets. And it doesn't feel like it's another hour and a half of school every week. It's actually down the street, a great place called 343 Labs, right here, like maybe 300 feet down on this block, on 119 West 23rd. And so he goes there, for example, but he loves planes. The other thing, he was talking to a guy, we went down to Miami last week, and he was talking to one of the attendants who was a pilot, who's studying to be a pilot, and now he's obsessed with it. He's like, Dad, I want to be a pilot. So what did I have to, I went in and I looked at pilot programs. He can start when he's 15 to do simulator stuff, etc. So he's like, yep, 15, man. 4 years, Dad, you're up. And I was like, okay. So that's my advice, is don't let anyone define your circumstances but yourself.
Yeah.
And this is something I tell a lot of young folks who are trying to break into, for example, the advertising world. No one knows.
Right.
The best, most famous, most well-remunerated CMO, they don't know. They don't know why people buy things. They don't know what's going to be successful. No one knows. Everyone's plugging away, trying to figure out how to reduce the distance between the brand and the consumer. No one knows, really. And take that as a given. Like, no one knows.
You figure that out when you go into like the quote unquote best top companies to work for, and everyone's running around with their heads chopped off, and you're like, oh.
No one knows.
Yeah.
No one knows. Everyone has a certain amount of experience that they can draw from.
Right.
And that helps them inform decisions better. But no one. You can go to Tim Cook, you can go to Elon Musk, you can go to Bernard Arnault and say, how do people buy? What do they buy? What can you guarantee people are going to buy? They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. They're going to give you a sort of historically informed answer, but who knows?
So might as well try, right? Because it could be you.
Who knew? Again, like I said, the cemetery of failed TikTok. Who knew TikTok? I remember when TikTok launched, I was like, this is for toddlers.
Yeah.
And now, if you don't have a TikTok strategy, you can get fired from your job as like head of, brand or comms or CMO, et cetera. If you don't understand the inner workings of TikTok. Same thing with Instagram.
Yeah.
You thought it was just people taking pictures of their parakeets. Now,
and over editing.
And now it's like this indispensable platform that you have to have some sort of strategy for. So go for it. No one knows. And that's what makes things exciting. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. So just shoot your shot and see if it works. And if it doesn't, just try another thing and just keep going. In
the great words of Michael Jordan, you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
That's right. That's right. And that's 100% right. And you just never know what else you can be good at. Mm-hmm. That's also something that I teach my kids all the time. Is, once they feel like they've mastered something or they're bored with something, then we go, okay, what else do you think you'd be really good at? Mm-hmm. And their answer is invariably, I don't know, Dad, can we get nuggets? But then it's my wife and I's job to kind of go, okay, and just try to put them in situations where they can discover new things and new kindle to light a fire for another interest, And that's why we take them to these random places. We went to Santa Fe, New Mexico last year, and my kids were appalled. They were aghast. Like, why are we here with the old fossilized people? But I wanted them to understand the Native American culture and how it's really shaped everything around there, and also how far it's come, which is not a pretty story, obviously. But I need them to understand that. We drove from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, and there's all these reservations on the road, and my son was like, "What's a reservation?" And it's and I'm not in any way like expert in Native American culture, and certainly the relationship between the Native American population then and now. But notionally, I'm able to explain what that is. And he was fascinated. He was like, "Well, wait a minute, why do they live there?" I'm like, "It's not like a choice. This was, things like that." I want them to, again, it's in their brain. They're not going to use it as they're watching whatever Animaniacs, but it allows them to, it gives them a little bit more of a legend to the map of their world, where they can actually go, "Oh, okay, well, certain people who used to live there now live here through no fault of their own, really, being conquered essentially. But the city of Santa Fe still reveres that culture, And I got this bracelet there.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's like silver, and it's worked by real Native American things like that. I think are important for them to start making these little connections. They made me promise never to go back there because they were so bored. But that's again part of my job, is to help them see not necessarily just more of the world physically, like going to places, but just try to understand how things connect more. Because they can only learn so much, from 8:30 to 2:30 in their after school programs, but they learn just as much.
I think everything I learned came from travel.
Yeah.
Like, that I think was the most valuable gift that my parents could have ever given me.
Yeah. And I think it's a lesson for a lot of people. You don't need to necessarily go to Italy to travel. You can, because travel shouldn't be this big elitist, pricey, privileged endeavor.
It's just going somewhere that you wouldn't go in your day to day.
Exactly. You can go to Rhode Island.
I could go up to Harlem.
Yeah, exactly. And there's kids who I know, they're born in Harlem, or they're uptown, they're Harlem Bronx. They've like never been to Hoboken, for example. Now, that's fine. There's no great need to go to Hoboken. But shout out to everyone in Hoboken. But still,
it's an example.
A PATH train. It's like $2.75, and then you're in this place, by the river, and you see this beautiful. Just even to be able to see New York City from like Exchange Place, like get the PATH first stop, and then to be able to see the full, like skyline, changes your understanding.
Like, oh wow, there's different perspectives of the same thing.
Exactly, and the buildings that you kind of see at ground level, you see them in front of you, and it's this wonderful visual tapestry that allows you to kind of see the evolution and how a city is built over time. Things like that, I think, are really important. And so that's why I tell people when they, see our Instagram or whatever, they go, "Oh, we're going to these places. I got 3, 4, 5 kids, and I can't." It's not. You don't have to get on a plane and get a hotel. You can literally do something like that for a day, and then just kind of change your perspective a little bit. Opportunity is everywhere if you know where to look for it.
I think we're done. I love it. We could talk for way longer.
But you gotta.